Maria Santos wiped the grease from her hands with an old rag, leaving dark streaks across the faded fabric. The small garage in East Los Angeles buzzed with the sound of power tools and the occasional curse word from her father, who was bent over the hood of a 1987 Chevy. At 19, Maria had spent more time under car hoods than most mechanics twice her age. Her calloused hands told stories of countless hours rebuilding engines, fine-tuning carburetors, and coaxing life back into vehicles that others had written off as junk. The Santos family garage wasn't much to look at from the outside. Paint peeled from the walls and the sign out front had lost half its letters years ago. But inside, magic happened daily. Cars that arrived on tow trucks left purring like satisfied cats. Maria's father, Roberto, had built his reputation one satisfied customer at a time over 30 years. He never advertised, never made grand promises. Word of mouth brought them enough business to keep the lights on and food on the table. Maria learned by watching, then by doing. At 12, she could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. By 15, she was rebuilding transmissions with her eyes closed. Her friends at school talked about makeup and boys while Maria dreamed of horsepower and torque. They giggled about weekend parties while she planned weekend projects in the garage. She didn't mind being different. The smell of motor oil was her perfume, and the sound of a perfectly tuned engine was her favorite music. The local racing scene knew about Maria, but not in the way she wanted. They knew her as Roberto's daughter, the girl who fixed their cars when they broke down after weekend races at the nearby speedway. She was the one they called when their engines seized up or their transmissions failed. She was useful, reliable, and completely invisible as anything more than a mechanic. The idea that she might want to race never crossed their minds. Racing was a man's world, and everyone seemed comfortable keeping it that way. The drivers were men, the pit crews were men, even most of the spectators were men. Women attended as girlfriends, wives, or daughters. They cheered from the stands, served food at the concession stands, or helped with merchandise sales. The closest most women got to the track was cleaning the grease stains from racing suits. Maria had been watching races since she could walk. Every Saturday night, she stood in the pits with her father, studying the cars, listening to the engines, learning the subtle differences between winners and losers. She memorized which drivers took risks and which played it safe. She knew which cars had the power but lacked the handling, and which had great setups but unreliable engines. Most importantly, she began to see patterns that others missed. Turning point came on a sweltering August evening. Danny Rodriguez, a regular customer and weekend racer, brought his Mustang to the garage with a blown engine. He paced around the shop like a caged animal, complaining about missing the next 3 races while Maria and her father rebuilt his motor. The regional championship was heating up, and Danny was sitting in 3rd place with a real chance at the title. "I need this car ready by next weekend," Danny said for the 5th time that hour. "The Henderson boy is breathing down my neck in the standings. Miss 2 more races and I'm done for the season." Maria looked up from the engine block she was cleaning. "What if someone else drove your car while yours is being fixed?" Danny laughed, but not in a mean way. "Who? Everyone else is already racing their own rides. Besides, insurance won't cover just anyone getting behind the wheel. They need racing experience." "I have racing experience," Maria said quietly. The garage fell silent except for the hum of the air compressor. Roberto stopped what he was doing and stared at his daughter. Danny's expression shifted from amusement to confusion to something approaching disbelief. "You've never raced before, Maria," Danny said carefully. "I've been racing since I was 16, she replied, continuing to work on the engine. "Just not officially. I take cars out to the desert tracks on weeknights. I've probably logged more hours behind the wheel than half the guys at the speedway." This was true, though Maria had never mentioned it to anyone. For 3 years, she had been sneaking out after the garage closed, driving to abandoned tracks outside the city. She practiced with different cars, learning how each one handled, how to find the racing line, how to manage tires over long runs. She raced against herself, against the clock, and occasionally against other night owls who shared her passion for speed and secrecy. Roberto set down his wrench and walked over to his daughter. His face was hard to read, cycling through surprise, concern, and something that might have been pride. Mija, racing is dangerous, and expensive, and what, Papa? And I'm a girl? Maria's voice carried no anger, just directness. I can build engines better than most of the guys racing. I know these cars inside and out. I know the track better than drivers who have been racing there for years. What I don't have is someone willing to give me a chance. Danny scratched his head, leaving a streak of grease in his hair. Even if I wanted to let you drive, which I'm not saying I do, you'd need a racing license. You'd need safety gear. The other drivers would eat you alive. The other drivers don't scare me, Maria said. Their cars breaking down scares me. Their poor racing lines scare me. Their lack of mechanical knowledge scares me. But the drivers themselves? They're just people who push gas pedals and turn steering wheels. I can do that. The conversation might have ended there, dismissed as the unrealistic dreams of a young woman who spent too much time around racing cars. But fate has a way of creating opportunities for those brave enough to seize them. 3 days later, the local speedway announced an open entry race for the following month. Anyone with a valid driver's license, basic safety equipment, and a car that could pass inspection could enter. The prize money wasn't huge, but it was real. More importantly, it was a chance. Maria made her decision that night. She had been saving money from her work at the garage for 2 years, originally planning to buy a car of her own for daily driving. Instead, she would use that money to enter the race. She would prove that she belonged on the track, not just in the garage. She would show everyone that speed and skill had nothing to do with gender, and everything to do with determination and talent. The laughter would come later, but the dream started right there in that small garage in East Los Angeles, with grease under her fingernails and fire in her eyes. Maria's announcement at dinner that she planned to enter the Riverside Speedway open entry race landed like a bomb in the middle of the Santos family's small kitchen. Her mother, Carmen, dropped her fork, and it clattered against her plate. Her younger brother, Miguel, stopped chewing his food mid-bite. Roberto sat back in his chair, his expression cycling through disbelief, concern, and resignation. Absolutely not, Carmen said, her voice sharp with worry. Racing is too dangerous, Mija. People get hurt, killed even. We've seen it on television. Maria had expected this reaction. Her mother worried when she stayed out past 10 at night, so the idea of her daughter driving at high speeds around a track with other cars would naturally terrify her. But Maria had done her homework. She knew the statistics, understood the safety improvements made to modern racing, and had already researched the safety equipment she would need. Mama, I'll have a roll cage, a racing harness, a helmet, fire-resistant suit. I'll be safer in that race car than driving to the grocery store, Maria said, though she knew the logic wouldn't ease her mother's fears. Miguel, who had always looked up to his sister, found his voice first. Are you really going to race against all those guys? They're going to be so mad when you beat them. This made Maria smile despite the tension. At 16, Miguel possessed an unwavering confidence in his sister's abilities that sometimes surprised even her. He had grown up watching her fix impossible problems, tackle challenges that stumped grown men, and succeed through pure determination. Roberto remained quiet, studying his daughter's face. Finally, he spoke. You've been thinking about this for a long time, haven't you? Maria nodded. Every night when I go to sleep, I dream about racing. Every morning when I wake up, I think about what it would feel like to prove I belong out there. I can't shake it, Papa. I have to try. The conversation continued for 2 hours. Carmen presented every argument against racing she could think of. Roberto asked practical questions about costs, safety requirements, and logistics. Miguel offered enthusiastic support and volunteered to help with everything from car preparation to pit crew duties. By the time they cleared the dinner dishes, an uneasy truce had been reached. Maria could pursue her racing dream, but she would do it with her family's support, not despite their opposition. The next morning, Maria drove to Henderson's Auto Parts, the largest racing supply store in the region. The owner, Frank Henderson, had known the Santos family for years. His son Tommy was the driver Danny had mentioned, currently sitting second in the regional championship standings. Frank looked surprised when Maria walked in alone. "Hey there, Maria. Your dad need parts for something?" "Actually, I need parts for myself," Maria replied. "I'm entering the open race next month." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "You're entering? As a driver?" "As a driver," Maria confirmed. "I need to price out safety equipment and see what it's going to cost to get properly set up." Frank scratched his chin, processing this information. "Well, I'll be. Tommy's going to have something to say about this. He's been complaining all season about not having enough real competition." He paused, studying Maria's face. "You serious about this, girl?" "Dead serious." Frank walked her through the store, showing her helmets, racing suits, gloves, and shoes. The prices made Maria's stomach clench. A proper safety setup would cost nearly half of her savings, leaving precious little for entry fees, gas, and car preparation. But she had committed to this path, and she would find a way to make it work. "Tell you what," Frank said after writing up the total cost. "You pay for the helmet today, and I'll let you work out a payment plan for the rest. I've seen your work in your dad's shop. You're better than most of the mechanics around here. Help me out on weekends with some of the racing setups, and we'll call it even." Maria felt a surge of gratitude. "You'd do that? Racing needs more good drivers, not just more drivers who can afford the equipment. If you're half as good behind the wheel as you are with a wrench, you'll shake things up around here." Word spread quickly through the local racing community. By the end of the week, everyone knew that Santos Girl was planning to enter the open race. The reactions ranged from amused disbelief to outright hostility. Some drivers joked that she would provide comic relief. Others worried she would cause accidents by not knowing proper racing etiquette. A few openly questioned whether women should be allowed on the track at all. Danny Rodriguez stopped by the garage to check on his engine rebuild and found Maria installing new pistons with surgical precision. "You really going through with this racing thing?" "Unless my car fails inspection or I break both my legs, yes. You know they're all talking about you, right? Making bets about how long you'll last before you spin out or get scared and pit." Maria looked up from the engine. "What kind of bets?" "Tommy Henderson's got money on you not finishing the first lap. Big Mike Wilson thinks you'll crash before the green flag. Even the nice guys like Jerry Patterson think you'll pull into the pits after 10 laps when you realize how intense it gets." This information didn't discourage Maria. If anything, it motivated her further. She had faced skepticism her entire life. Teachers who questioned whether a girl could handle advanced automotive classes. Customers who asked to speak to her father, even when she was the one who had diagnosed their car problems. Other teenagers who assumed she was just playing around in the garage until she got married and settled down. "Are you betting against me too?" Maria asked. Danny grinned. "Hell no. I've seen you work. If you approach racing the same way you approach engine building, methodical and precise, you might surprise some people. Besides, I like long odds." Maria spent the following weeks preparing like an athlete training for the Olympics. She studied video footage of previous races at Riverside Speedway, memorizing every turn, every spot where passes commonly occurred, every place where drivers typically made mistakes. She practiced visualization techniques, imagining herself navigating through traffic, handling different racing scenarios, maintaining focus during long runs. Her father helped her select a car for the race. They found a 1985 Monte Carlo with a solid frame and basic racing modifications at an estate sale. The engine needed work, but that played to Maria's strengths. She completely rebuilt the motor, blueprinting every component, balancing the rotating, assembly, and tuning the carburation for maximum performance. Miguel appointed himself as her unofficial marketing manager, creating handmade signs to promote Santos Racing, and convincing their neighbor to let him use her computer to design a simple logo. Carmen, despite her continued worry, began attending every garage session, bringing sandwiches and learning racing terminology so she could better understand her daughter's passion. 2 weeks before the race, Maria received an unexpected visitor. Tommy Henderson walked into the garage while she was adjusting the car's suspension settings. At 24, Tommy was considered one of the rising stars in regional racing. He was also known for his traditional views about racing remaining a male-dominated sport. "Heard you think you can run with the big boys," Tommy said, his tone neutral but his body language suggesting skepticism. Maria continued working on the suspension. "I think I can run with anyone who shows up that night. Racing's different than working on cars, Maria. Out there, split-second decisions matter. Aggression matters. Physical strength matters when you're fighting a steering wheel for 300 laps. And intelligence matters. Mechanical sympathy matters. Knowing how to make a car handle properly matters." Maria stood up and faced Tommy directly. "I've been preparing for this race like my life depends on it, have you?" Tommy studied the Monte Carlo, walking around it slowly. Despite himself, he was impressed by the quality of preparation. The car looked professional, purposeful, ready for serious competition. "Nice work," he admitted grudgingly. "Thanks. May the best driver win." Tommy nodded and headed toward the door. As he reached the threshold, he turned back. "Maria, good luck out there. And watch out for Big Mike Wilson. He doesn't like being passed, especially by someone he thinks doesn't belong." After Tommy left, Maria realized something had changed. The conversation hadn't been entirely friendly, but it had been respectful. For the first time, another driver had acknowledged her as actual competition rather than dismissing her as a novelty. It was a small victory, but Maria would take all the victories she could get, no matter how small. The week before the race, Maria's world narrowed to a single focus. Every morning she woke thinking about tire pressure and gear ratios. Every evening she fell asleep visualizing the perfect racing line through Riverside Speedway's turns. She had transformed from a mechanic who dreamed about racing into a racer who happened to be excellent at mechanics. Her preparation went far beyond what most weekend warriors attempted. While other drivers relied on gut instincts and natural talent, Maria approached racing like an engineering problem that demanded systematic solutions. She created detailed notebooks tracking suspension settings, tire temperatures, and fuel consumption rates. She studied weather patterns and how different atmospheric conditions might affect her car's performance. She even researched the driving styles of every competitor she expected to face. The garage had become mission control for Santos Racing. Carmen had given up trying to cook family dinners because no one was ever hungry at the same time anymore. Roberto worked his regular customers during the day, then stayed late helping Maria fine-tune her Monte Carlo. Miguel had appointed himself chief data analyst, timing her practice sessions and recording every adjustment she made to the car. "Your average lap time is improving," Miguel announced during one evening session, consulting his notebook with scientific seriousness. "You're 0.3 of a second faster than last week, and you're hitting your marks more consistently." Maria smiled at her brother's dedication. He had learned racing terminology faster than most people learned foreign languages, and his timing sheets looked professional enough for a major racing team. "What's the competition looking like?" "Tommy Henderson's been running practice sessions too. Jerry Patterson brought his car out twice this week, but nobody's working as hard as you." This intelligence came from Frank Henderson at the parts store, who had become an unofficial source of information about competitor activities. Despite his son being Maria's competition, Frank seemed genuinely interested in seeing how the unknown Santos girl would perform against the established racing community. 3 days before the race, Maria experienced her first real setback. During a practice session at the abandoned desert track, her engine developed a disturbing noise. She immediately shut it down and called her father on her cell phone. Roberto arrived 30 minutes later with a trailer, and together they loaded the Monte Carlo for the trip back to the garage. The diagnosis was grim. A connecting rod bearing had failed, potentially damaging the crankshaft. In normal circumstances, this would require a complete engine rebuild that could take weeks. With only 3 days remaining, most people would have withdrawn from the race and tried again next year. Maria refused to consider withdrawal. She and Roberto worked through the night, disassembling the engine completely. The crankshaft could be saved, but it needed professional machining that wouldn't be available until the next morning. While they waited for the machine shop to open, Maria organized every component, ordering new parts and preparing for rapid reassembly. Mija, even if we get all the parts, rebuilding this engine in 3 days is crazy, Roberto said as they cleaned up at dawn. Maybe you should wait for the next race. Papa, I've been waiting my whole life for this chance. I'm not going to let a bearing stop me now. Carmen arrived with coffee and breakfast, surveying the organized chaos of engine parts covering every surface in the garage. How bad is it? Bad enough that most people would quit, Roberto replied. Not bad enough to stop our Maria. For the next 60 hours, the Santos family garage operated like a trauma unit. Roberto called in favors from suppliers to rush deliver parts. Frank Henderson loaned them specialty tools. Miguel coordinated phone calls and parts deliveries. Carmen kept everyone fed and caffeinated. Maria orchestrated the entire operation while simultaneously rebuilding the most critical engine of her life. They finished the rebuild at 11 o'clock Thursday night, 15 hours before the race. The engine started immediately and sounded perfect, but there was no time for proper break-in procedures or fine-tuning. Maria would have to learn her rebuilt engine's characteristics during warm-up laps on race day. Friday morning brought the technical inspection at Riverside Speedway. Maria loaded her Monte Carlo onto the borrowed trailer and drove to the track with her entire family. The sight of the speedway in daylight with cars arriving and pit crews setting up made her stomach flutter with excitement and nervousness. The inspection area buzzed with activity. Dozens of race cars sat in long lines while officials checked safety equipment, measured engines, and verified that each vehicle met the race regulations. Maria parked at the end of the line and began the waiting process. The laughter started almost immediately. "Look what we got here," called out a voice from the next line over. "Little Maria Santos thinks she's going racing. Somebody better warn the other drivers," another voice added. "Might need to slow down so she can keep up. Hope she knows which pedal is the brake." Maria kept her expression neutral and continued preparing her car for inspection. She had expected this reaction and had trained herself not to respond to obvious provocations. But the comments continued, growing louder and more personal, as other drivers noticed her presence. Big Mike Wilson, a veteran driver known for his aggressive style and short temper, wandered over to look at her Monte Carlo. At 6'4" and nearly 300 pounds, Mike intimidated people without trying. When he wanted to intimidate someone, he was genuinely frightening. "This your first time at a real track, sweetheart?" Mike asked, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby drivers to hear. "Yes, sir," Maria replied politely. "Well, let me give you some free advice. Racing's not like the movies. Cars are heavy, they're fast, and when things go wrong, they go wrong quick. You might want to start with go-karts or something safer." "I appreciate the concern," Maria said, continuing to check her equipment. "But I've prepared for this race, and I'm ready to compete." Mike's laugh was loud and dismissive. "Honey, I've been racing for 15 years. I've seen tough guys break down crying after their first real race. You have any idea what it feels like to have 30 cars breathing down your neck at 100 miles per hour? Before Maria could answer, Tommy Henderson appeared beside Mike. "Leave her alone, Mike. She's here, she's legal, and she's got as much right to race as anyone else." "Tommy, you're too soft," Mike replied. "Someone's going to get hurt because we're letting people play race car driver who have no business being out there." "Maria's not playing anything," came another voice. Danny Rodriguez walked up, having overheard the conversation. "I've seen her work. She knows cars better than most of the guys here." "Knowing cars and driving them in competition are two different things," Mike said. "But hey, it's your funeral, girl. Just try to stay out of my way when the racing gets serious." The inspection process took 2 hours. Maria's car passed every requirement easily, impressing the officials with its preparation quality and attention to detail. Her safety equipment exceeded minimum standards. Her engine measurements fell well within the regulations. By every objective measure, she was ready to race. But as she drove back to the pit area to prepare for that evening's event, Maria realized that her biggest challenge wouldn't be the track, the other cars, or even the engine that had been rebuilt. Just hours earlier, her biggest challenge would be proving that she belonged among drivers who had already decided she didn't. The afternoon practice session would be her first chance to show everyone what Santos Racing could do. As she pulled on her helmet and climbed into the Monte Carlo, Maria felt the weight of every doubt, every joke, and every dismissive comment that had been directed her way. She would carry all of that weight with her onto the track, and she would use it as fuel for the drive of her life. The laughter was about to stop whether they were ready for it or not. The afternoon practice session at Riverside Speedway began with 37 cars taking to the track for 20 minutes of warm-up time. Maria sat in her Monte Carlo, engine idling, waiting for the track officials to give the signal for cars to begin their practice runs. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the rumble of her freshly rebuilt engine. Through her helmet, she could hear the radio chatter from other teams. Most drivers were discussing tire temperatures and suspension adjustments. A few were making jokes about the girl driver and taking bets on how many laps she would complete before pulling into the pits. Maria turned off her radio. She needed to focus on learning her car and the track, not on managing other people's expectations. The green flag waved, and 37 race cars accelerated onto the racing surface. Maria had studied this moment countless times in videos and her imagination, but the reality overwhelmed her senses. The noise was incredible, a symphony of high-performance engines echoing off the grandstands. The vibrations traveled through her body as other cars passed nearby. The sensation of speed, even at practice pace, was unlike anything she had experienced. For the first 5 laps, Maria focused solely on learning the track surface and getting comfortable with her car. The rebuilt engine felt strong but different, requiring subtle adjustments to her driving style. The tire pressures she had calculated for optimal performance seemed correct, and the suspension settings were working well. Most importantly, the car felt balanced and predictable, responding exactly as she had hoped. By lap 10, Maria began to push harder, exploring the limits of her car and her own abilities. She found the optimal racing line through each turn, discovered where she could brake later than her initial estimates, and identified sections where her car's strengths could be maximized. The Monte Carlo was particularly good in the tight corners where her precise setup work paid dividends. Other drivers began to notice. The joking on their radio channels became less frequent as they realized Maria wasn't struggling or making obvious mistakes. She was running consistent lap times that placed her solidly in the middle of the field, faster than many veterans and competitive with drivers who had years of experience at Riverside Speedway. Tommy Henderson, monitoring her progress from his own car, keyed his radio to his crew chief. "That Santos girl is running pretty good times. Better than I expected." "How good?" his crew chief asked. "Good enough that I'm not laughing anymore." Big Mike Wilson had a different reaction. Every time Maria appeared in his mirrors, he moved over slightly, forcing her to take a wider line or brake earlier. It was legal blocking, but aggressive and unnecessary during a practice session. Mike's message was clear. He would not make racing easy for the newcomer. Maria recognized the blocking tactics but refused to be intimidated. Instead of getting frustrated, she studied Mike's defensive moves, learning his patterns and identifying opportunities for future races. Every aggressive block taught her something useful about racecraft and strategy. With 5 minutes remaining in practice, Maria decided to attempt her first real passing move. Jerry Patterson, a respected veteran, was running slightly slower lap times in an older Camaro. Maria had been following him for several laps, learning his braking points and corner exit speeds. As they approached the back straightaway, she pulled to the inside and drew alongside Patterson's car. The two cars ran wheel to wheel for 300 yards at over 90 miles per hour. Patterson, surprised by the bold move, gave Maria racing room while maintaining his own line. As they entered turn 3, Maria's superior corner speed allowed her to complete the pass cleanly and pull away. It was textbook racing, executed perfectly by someone who supposedly didn't know what she was doing. The grandstands, sparsely populated for practice but containing several hundred spectators, buzzed with excitement. Many fans had heard about the girl driver and came early to witness what they expected would be entertainment at her expense. Instead, they were watching legitimate racing from someone who clearly belonged on the track. In the pits, Frank Henderson watched the action through binoculars while timing his son's laps. "Tommy, that Santos girl just passed Jerry Patterson on the outside of turn 3. Clean as a whistle." "I saw it," Tommy replied over the radio. She's not just keeping up, she's racing. Practice ended without incident, but the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. The laughter had stopped. Drivers who had been making jokes an hour earlier now spoke about Maria in practical terms, discussing her lap times and racing technique rather than her gender. She had forced them to take her seriously through the simple expedient of being fast and competitive. Back in the pits, Maria climbed out of her car to find a small crowd waiting. Roberto, Carmen, and Miguel beamed with pride, but they were joined by several other team members and even some drivers who wanted to congratulate her on a strong practice session. "Nice driving out there," Jerry Patterson said, extending his hand. "That pass you made on me was perfectly executed. Textbook stuff." "Thank you," Maria replied, pulling off her helmet. "Your car handles really well in the corners. I had to time. That passed just right." Danny Rodriguez appeared with a stopwatch and a grin. "You were turning lap times that would put you 15th in tonight's starting lineup. Not bad for someone who's never seen this track before today." The compliments felt good, but Maria tried not to let them affect her preparation for the main event. Practice had been encouraging, but the real race would present different challenges. 40 laps of competition, with prize money and bragging rights on the line, would test everything she had learned about racing and about herself. As the evening approached, more spectators arrived at Riverside Speedway. Word had spread through the local racing community that Santos Girl had looked impressive during practice. Some fans came hoping to see her succeed. Others arrived expecting her to struggle when the competition intensified. Most were simply curious to witness something unprecedented in their racing experience. Maria spent the 2 hours between practice and racing time making final adjustments to her car. She checked tire pressures, topped off fluids, and reviewed her race strategy with Roberto, who had appointed himself crew chief for the evening. Carmen and Miguel organized their pit area and prepared for their roles as the official Santos Racing support team. "Remember," Roberto told his daughter as she prepared to get back in the car, "you've already proven you belong here. Now just drive your race, be smart about traffic, and let the car do what you built it to do." "What if I crash?" Maria asked, voicing her only real fear. "Then you crash," Roberto replied. "But you crash trying to win, not trying to just survive. That's the difference between a racer and someone who's just along for the ride." As the sun set over Riverside Speedway, 37 race cars rolled onto the track for the formation lap. Maria found herself starting 23rd, based on her practice times. It was a respectable position for a rookie, placing her ahead of several experienced drivers and giving her opportunities to move forward during the race. The grandstands were more crowded than usual for a local race, with over 2,000 spectators filling the seats. Many held handmade signs supporting various drivers, but Maria noticed several signs that mentioned her name. Some were encouraging, others were skeptical, but all acknowledged that something special was about to happen. As the cars completed their warm-up lap and began to form up for the start, Maria took a deep breath and gripped her steering wheel. In less than 5 minutes, the green flag would wave and she would begin the race she had dreamed about her entire life. The laughter had stopped during practice, but the real test was about to begin. Everything she had learned, everything she had prepared for, and everything she had sacrificed would be decided over the next 40 laps. Maria Santos was ready to show the racing world what she could do when it counted most. The green flag dropped at exactly 8:15, and 37 race cars accelerated into the first turn of the Riverside Speedway open entry race. Maria had positioned her Monte Carlo on the inside line, but the chaos of the start immediately challenged her preparation. Cars 3 wide fought for position, engines roared at maximum RPM, and the carefully planned racing lines she had memorized dissolved into pure survival instincts. A yellow Camaro spun sideways directly in front of her entering turn 2. Maria yanked her steering wheel hard left, missing the spinning car by inches while maintaining control of her own vehicle. 2 other drivers weren't as fortunate, collecting the Camaro and bringing out the caution flag before the first lap was complete. As the field slowed down and bunched up behind the pace car, Maria realized she had gained 4 positions during the opening lap chaos, moving from 23rd to 19th place. "Nice driving, mija," Roberto's voice crackled through her radio headset. You avoided that mess perfectly. Maria keyed her microphone. The car feels good, Papa. Really good. The restart came after 5 caution laps, with Maria maintaining her 19th place position. This time the start was cleaner and the field spread out as drivers settled into their racing rhythm. Maria found herself behind an older Buick that was clearly struggling with handling problems, and she planned her strategy for getting past the slower car. By lap 15, Maria had worked her way up to 16th place through a combination of smart driving and mechanical reliability. Several cars ahead of her had developed problems that forced them to fall back or retire entirely. Her freshly rebuilt engine was running perfectly, maintaining consistent temperatures and producing strong power throughout the RPM range. The real racing began around lap 20, when the field had spread out enough for drivers to find their preferred racing lines and begin making strategic moves. Maria had been following Tommy Henderson for several laps, studying his technique and looking for an opportunity to pass. Tommy was running in 8th place, having started near the front, and his Chevelle was clearly one of the faster cars in the field. Stay patient, Roberto advised over the radio. You're running faster lap times than most of the cars ahead of you. The passes will come. Maria's patience paid off on lap 25. The driver in 10th place, running just ahead of her and Tommy, made a mistake in turn 3, sliding wide and opening up the racing line. Maria seized the opportunity, diving to the inside and passing both the struggling car and Tommy Henderson in one smooth motion. The crowd cheered as she moved into 8th place, her highest position of the night. Tommy, surprised by the aggressive but clean pass, keyed his radio. Did that Santos girl just put a move on me? She sure did, his crew chief replied, and she's pulling away from you. Big Mike Wilson, running in 4th place, had been monitoring Maria's progress through his crew chief's radio updates. Every position she gained irritated him more, confirming his worst fears about allowing inexperienced drivers into serious racing events. When his crew chief informed him that Maria had just moved into 8th place, Mike made a decision that would change the entire complexion of the race. She's getting too close, Mike growled into his radio. Time to teach her a lesson about real racing. Mike began driving more aggressively, blocking other drivers and making risky moves that forced everyone behind him to drive more defensively. His tactics worked initially, allowing him to pull away from the cars in his immediate area. But they also bunched up the field behind him, creating opportunities for drivers who could navigate through traffic efficiently. Maria found herself benefiting from Mike's aggressive driving. While he was focused on blocking the cars directly behind him, she was able to work her way through the resulting traffic jams with surgical precision. Her smaller, lighter Monte Carlo could accelerate out of corners faster than the heavier muscle cars, and her mechanical sympathy allowed her to push her equipment harder without risking mechanical failure. Lap 30 brought another caution flag, when 2 cars tangled coming out of turn 4. The restart with 10 laps remaining would determine the final outcome of the race. Maria had moved up to 6th place and found herself restarting directly behind Jerry Patterson, who had recovered from his earlier struggles and was having a strong run. The restart was intense. 5 cars battled for the lead while Maria focused on maintaining her position and looking for opportunities to move forward. Patterson's experience showed as he defended his 5th place position skillfully, but Maria had learned his tendencies during practice and felt confident she could find a way past him when the time was right. That time came on lap 35. Patterson's car began showing signs of tire wear, sliding slightly in the corners and losing acceleration down the straightaways. Maria pulled alongside him, entering the back straight and completed the pass before the next turn. She was now running 5th place with 5 laps remaining, ahead of drivers who had been racing for years. The crowd was on its feet, cheering for the underdog story unfolding before them. Many spectators who had come expecting to see Maria struggle were now hoping to see her finish in the top 5. The impossible was becoming reality, 1 lap at a time. Big Mike Wilson, still running 4th, received an update from his crew chief that made his blood boil. That Santos girl is in 5th place and she's catching you. Mike could see Maria's Monte Carlo in his mirrors, gaining ground with each lap. Her car seemed to be getting stronger as the race wore on, while his own machine was beginning to show signs of the hard driving he had subjected it to throughout the event. The gap between them shrank from 5 seconds to 3 seconds to 2 seconds as they entered the final 3 laps. "She's right behind you now, Mike," his crew chief warned. Mike's response was to drive even harder, taking risks that veteran drivers would normally avoid in the closing laps of a race. He dove to the inside of lapped traffic, forcing slower cars to move out of his way. He braked later into corners, trusting his experience to keep him out of trouble. His tactics worked for 2 laps, but they also put tremendous stress on his car's systems. On the final lap, approaching turn 3, Mike's aggressive driving finally caught up with him. His right front tire, overheated from hard braking and cornering, gave up its grip suddenly. His car slid sideways, blocking the racing line and creating a dangerous situation for everyone behind him. Maria, running just 50 yards behind Mike, had less than 2 seconds to react. She could see the situation developing before Mike's car actually lost control, and she had already planned her response. Instead of following Mike's line through the turn, she swung to the outside, using a line that would normally be slower, but was now the only safe option. The maneuver worked perfectly. As Mike's car spun through turns 3 and 4, Maria drove past him on the outside, maintaining full control and losing minimal time. She crossed the finish line in 4th place, her best possible result given the circumstances, while Mike ended up facing backward in the infield grass. The checkered flag fell, and Maria coasted down the front straight, her mission accomplished, beyond her wildest expectations. She had not only finished the race but had earned a top 5 finish against experienced competition. More importantly, she had proven that speed and skill were not determined by gender, and that preparation and determination could overcome prejudice and skepticism. Roberto's voice came through her radio, thick with emotion. "You did it, mija. 4th place in your first race. I'm so proud of you." Carmen and Miguel were jumping up and down in the pits, holding their homemade Santos racing signs and cheering loud enough to be heard over the crowd noise. Other teams and drivers were applauding as Maria drove by, acknowledging her achievement, with the respect that genuine competitors show each other. As she pulled into her pit area and shut off her engine, Maria realized that everything had changed. She was no longer the girl who worked in her father's garage and dreamed about racing. She was a race car driver who had just announced herself to the world in the most dramatic way possible. The laughter had not just stopped, it had been replaced by genuine admiration and respect. But even as she celebrated her breakthrough performance, Maria knew this was just the beginning. One race had proven she could compete, but building a successful racing career would require much more. She would need sponsors, better equipment, and opportunities to race against even tougher competition. Most importantly, she would need to prove that her 4th place finish wasn't a fluke, but rather the first chapter in a story that was just getting started. The victory celebration in the Santos racing pit was unlike anything the small garage had ever experienced. Reporters from local newspapers crowded around Maria, asking questions about her background, her preparation, and her plans for future racing. Television cameras captured her family's emotional reactions as the reality of her 4th place finish sank in. For a brief moment, the girl who had been dismissed as a novelty just hours earlier was the center of attention for all the right reasons. "How does it feel to prove all the doubters wrong?" asked a reporter from the San Bernardino Sun. Maria, still wearing her racing suit and helmet tucked under her arm, chose her words carefully. "I didn't race tonight to prove anything to other people. I raced to prove something to myself. The fact that I finished 4th just shows that preparation and determination matter more than what other people think about your chances." Frank Henderson pushed through the crowd, carrying a small trophy. "4th place finisher gets hardware too," he said with a genuine smile. "You earned this tonight, Maria. Hell of a drive." The trophy was simple, nothing elaborate, but it represented validation that Maria had craved her entire life. As she held it, she realized this moment would mark the dividing line between her old life and whatever came next. Behind her, Roberto, wiped tears from his eyes while Carmen hugged Miguel so tightly he complained about not being able to breathe. But not everyone shared in the celebration. Big Mike Wilson, after extricating his car from the infield grass and returning to his pit area, was furious about the turn of events. His aggressive driving had cost him a certain top 5 finish, and seeing Maria receive praise for what he considered a lucky result intensified his anger. "She got lucky," Mike told anyone who would listen. "That last lap mess bailed her out. Put her in a real race with real competition, and she'll fold like a lawn chair." Tommy Henderson, who had finished 6th after Maria passed him, had a different perspective. "Mike, she outdrove you fair and square. That pass she made when you spun was beautiful. She saw the situation developing and took the right line, while you were focused on blocking instead of racing." The argument between Mike and Tommy attracted other drivers, creating 2 camps in the pit area. Veteran drivers split between those who respected Maria's performance and those who insisted her result was more luck than skill. The younger drivers, many of whom had grown up in a more progressive era, generally supported Maria and viewed her success as inspiration for others who felt excluded from racing. Jerry Patterson, the veteran who had been passed by Maria during the race, settled the debate with characteristic directness. "I've been racing for 20 years, he announced to the group. "That girl drove like she's been doing this for 20 years too. She made smart moves, kept her car clean, and earned every position she gained. Anyone who thinks different is letting their pride cloud their judgment." The controversy didn't diminish Maria's satisfaction with her performance, but it did clarify the challenges she would face moving forward. Succeeding once was difficult. Succeeding consistently while dealing with skepticism and hostility would be even harder. Some competitors would always view her presence as an unwelcome intrusion rather than legitimate competition. 3 days after the race, Maria returned to work at the Santos family garage, but everything felt different. The phone rang constantly, with interview requests, racing opportunities, and congratulations from people she had never met. A local speed shop offered to sponsor her for future races. A regional racing series invited her to compete in their next event. Most surprisingly, Frank Henderson asked if she would be interested in working part-time at his shop, helping prepare cars for other racers. The opportunities were exciting, but they also represented difficult decisions. Racing required time, money, and complete commitment. Maria would have to choose between expanding her racing activities and maintaining her responsibilities at her family's garage. Roberto made the choice easier by volunteering to handle more of the daily operations, so Maria could pursue her racing dreams. "You've already helped make this garage successful," Roberto told his daughter. "Now it's time for the garage to help make your racing successful." Carmen, despite her initial fears about racing dangers, had become Maria's strongest supporter. The pride she felt watching her daughter compete had overcome her worries about safety. "I've never been so nervous and so proud at the same time," she admitted. "But seeing you out there, holding your own against all those experienced drivers made me realize you were meant to do this." Miguel appointed himself as Maria's official publicist, creating a scrapbook of newspaper clippings and maintaining statistics about her racing performance. His mathematical analysis of her lap times, finishing positions, and mechanical reliability impressed even Maria with its thoroughness and accuracy. 2 weeks after the Riverside race, Maria received an unexpected phone call from a man named David Chen, who owned a small racing team based in Arizona. Chen had heard about Maria's performance and watched video footage of her race. He was impressed enough to offer her a ride in his team's secondary car for a regional touring series race. "I need a driver who can take care of equipment and finish races," Chen explained. "From what I've seen, you can do both. The car isn't the fastest in the field, but it's reliable and well prepared. Sound interesting?" Maria's heart raced as she considered the offer. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had hoped would result from her breakthrough performance. Racing for an established team would provide better equipment, professional support, and exposure to higher levels of competition. "What would you need from me?" Maria asked. "Just drive the car like you drove your own at Riverside. Smart, aggressive when you need to be, and focused on bringing home the best possible finish. Everything else we'll handle." The race was scheduled for 6 weeks later at Phoenix International Speedway, a much larger and more challenging track than Riverside. The competition would be significantly stronger, with drivers from multiple states competing for a substantial prize purse. It would be Maria's first real test against professional-level competition. As she hung up the phone and shared the news with her family, Maria realized her racing career had just taken its first major step forward. The girl who had been laughed at for entering a local race was now being recruited by professional teams who recognized her talent and potential. The garage where it all started continued to serve walk-in customers and regular clients, but it had also become the headquarters for Santos Racing, an operation that was growing beyond anyone's initial expectations. Maria's success had proven that dreams backed by preparation and determination could overcome any obstacle, including the skepticism of people who couldn't imagine a different way of doing things. 6 weeks later, Maria would strap herself into a professional race car at Phoenix International Speedway, competing against drivers who made their living behind the wheel. The little girl who had learned to diagnose engine problems by sound had become a woman who could make engines sing at speeds that most people could barely imagine. But that story would have to wait for another day. For now, it was enough to know that the laughter had stopped permanently, replaced by the sound of opportunity knocking on the door of a small garage in East Los Angeles, where a young woman had dared to dream big and then made those dreams come true through sheer force of will and unshakable determination.